King Midas and the Golden Touch. Once upon a time, in the ancient kingdom of Phrygia, there lived a mighty and wealthy king named Midas. His kingdom was known for its bountiful harvests, grand palaces, and lavish lifestyle. Yet, despite his great wealth and power, King Midas was not satisfied. He had one overwhelming desire: to be the richest man in the world. Midas had everything he could ever dream of: gold, jewels, servants, and lands. But his greed for more never ceased. He believed that no matter how much gold he had, it was never enough. In fact, he spent every day counting his riches, admiring the glittering treasures that filled his vaults. But he always felt a longing, a desire for something greater. One day, after a long and exhausting day of counting his treasures, Midas wandered into the garden of his palace to clear his mind. It was here that he encountered a strange and unexpected visitor, none other than the god of wine, Dionysus. Dionysus had come to the land of Phrygia to seek rest and solace from his endless journeys across the world. He was weary and in need of kindness. King Midas, ever the gracious host, welcomed Dionysus into his palace with open arms. He treated him to a feast filled with the finest food and wine, offering him the hospitality of a true king. Dionysus, deeply moved by Midas's kindness, decided to grant him a wish. "King Midas," Dionysus said with a smile, "you have shown me great kindness, and for that I will reward you. Ask for anything, and it will be yours." Midas, overjoyed at the opportunity, wasted no time in making his request. His heart, consumed by his insatiable greed, led him to wish for something that he thought would bring him eternal happiness. "I wish that everything I touch turns to gold," Midas declared, his voice filled with fervor. "With this gift, I will be the richest man in the world." Dionysus paused for a moment, considering the king's request. "Are you sure that this is what you truly want?" he asked, with a hint of caution. "Yes," Midas replied eagerly. "I want nothing more than to turn everything I touch into gold." With a deep sigh, Dionysus nodded and granted the wish. "So be it," he said, and with a wave of his hand, he disappeared from the palace as mysteriously as he had arrived. The next morning, King Midas awoke with excitement, eager to test his new power. He reached out and touched the golden statues in his palace, and to his amazement, they turned to solid gold. He touched the furniture, and it too turned to gleaming gold. He touched the fruits on his breakfast table, and they too turned to gold. Everything he touched was transformed into precious gold. At first, King Midas was delighted. He reveled in the sight of his golden palace, the piles of golden fruit, and the golden possessions that filled his life. It seemed as though his greatest wish had come true. No longer would he have to worry about running out of wealth or having enough treasures. He was the richest king in the world. But soon, the consequences of his greed began to reveal themselves. As the day wore on, Midas found himself growing hungry. He reached for a piece of fruit, but as soon as his fingers touched it, the fruit turned to gold. He could not eat it. His stomach growled with hunger, but there was no food he could consume. He called for his servants to bring him a meal, but when they set the food before him, it too turned to gold. Desperate, he stumbled into the garden, hoping to find something he could eat. He reached for the flowers, hoping to pluck a rose, but as soon as his hand touched the petals, they too turned to gold. Feeling weak and defeated, Midas sank to the ground. The golden touch that had seemed like such a blessing had now become a curse. He could not eat, could not drink, could not enjoy the simple pleasures of life. His once glorious riches now felt empty and useless. As he sat in despair, his daughter Marigold entered the garden. She ran toward his father, eager to see him after a long day. Midas, still lost in his misery, reached out to embrace her. But as his hands touched her, Marigold too was transformed into a golden statue. Her face frozen in a smile, her body gleaming in the sunlight, but lifeless.
King Midas fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He had lost the one thing that mattered most to him. The love of his daughter, the warmth of human connection, was now beyond his grasp. His golden touch had taken away his happiness, his family, and everything he had once cherished. With a heart full of sorrow, Midas realized the depth of his mistake. He called out to Dionysus, begging for mercy and asking to be freed from his cursed gift. "Great Dionysus," he cried, "I made a terrible mistake. Please take away this golden touch. I no longer want to be the richest man in the world if it means losing everything I love." Dionysus, hearing the king's plea, appeared before him once more. "Midas," the god said kindly, "you have learned a hard lesson. Wealth and greed can never bring true happiness. I will grant you your wish, but you must first learn to understand what truly matters in life." Dionysus waved his hand, and the golden curse was lifted. Midas's daughter, Marigold, was restored to her living form, and the food around him returned to its natural state. The once golden objects in his palace turned back into ordinary items, and the kingdom of Phrygia began to heal. Midas, deeply humbled and forever changed by his experience, vowed never to let greed guide his actions again. He spent the rest of his days with his daughter, his family, and his people, valuing the things that truly mattered: love, compassion, and kindness. From that day forward, Midas ruled his kingdom wisely, understanding that the greatest treasures in life cannot be measured in gold. And so Midas and his kingdom lived in peace and prosperity, not because of the gold that lined their vaults, but because they had learned the value of the things that could never be touched by greed.
Moral of the story? True happiness and fulfillment come not from wealth or material possessions, but from love, kindness, and the things that money cannot buy. Greed can blind us to what really matters, and sometimes we must lose everything to truly understand the value of what we have.